make this video kind of that overview, but really take the time to educate yourself on how these instruments work. Because the more you understand the instruments, the more creative you can be in how you structure deals.
Right, and you got to remember that human beings created these instruments in the first place, so you can take these instruments and use them how you need to, just like the human beings before us did. So first one I would say is that in real estate, people commonly misunderstand two different pieces of documents, okay? They misunderstand the owner of the property and they misconstrue it as the mortgage or the deed of trust. And a lot of people don't even know the word deed of trust is different than a mortgage, but also similar.
Very, very similar.
Right, the only difference is, well, let's go through this high level. So how do we know who the owner of a property is? Their name is on the deed, okay? So deed, take the word deed. If I'm the owner of a property, it means I have the deed, right? My name is on the deed. If I want Jerry to be the owner of the property, I literally can sign the deed over to Jerry, and Jerry is now the new owner of the property. Now, people also misunderstand the word title and deed, okay? So think about this, it's a very easy way to understand it. Deed is who owns the property, and title is how they hold the ownership, right? So title could be like tenants in common or these types of things. That is title. The deed, like if I go look up county records and I want to see who the owner of the property is, I'm not looking up title. I'm looking up who has their name on the deed. So the deed is the receipt of ownership. So
it could be multiple people, it could be entity, it could be these different things and that's the title.
Right, and if Jerry and I go and there you go, that's it. So if Jerry and I wanted to own a property together, my LLC and his LLC would be both named on the deed as the owners of that property or the named owners, but then how we hold that property, whether it's tenants in common or sole proprietorship or partnership or those types of things, that's title.
Yep,
right?
and different states have different things with how marriage works, right? So there's these different ways that you can hold the deed, but the deed is the ownership of the property and that gets recorded.
Right.
And there's a history of that too, that's very important.
When you say recorded, this is also a common thing that people misunderstand.
I'm glad you bring that up.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? What does it mean that it's recorded?
Okay, so every single county in the country has a recorder's office, right? Where you can see permits that are being pulled. You can see the most amazing data ever. Like if Jerry gave me a personal loan and he says, well, how do I make sure that you're going to pay me back? How do I make sure I have security with that loan? I go, well, why don't you record that loan against my property as a lien? That document shows up at the county recorder's office as public data.
Yeah, it's notice to the world.
Yes.
It's letting the public know by that recording because now anybody can look it up.
Right, my wife did a video about this about 2 months ago on her YouTube channel where she goes, watch me go record a document at the recorder's office. It costs $17 in an hour of your time.
Yeah.
So you can record just about
You can walk down there with it and they'll...
Right, it takes about, so you can record it, let's say today's Monday. By the end of the week, it'll show up on public record that there's a recorded document against that property, which is great, right? So now, let's say that long time ago, they started creating financing, right? Back like thousands of years ago, it was like I had to trade 17 goats to buy a shack. But then banks came in and they go, man, we can loan people money and they'll pay us interest. And then they created the 30-year mortgage. And people are like, wait, what the heck is a mortgage? Well, a mortgage is our ability to go buy something with the bank's money, right? And that agreement of what basically all the terms of that agreement are in that mortgage. But guess what? There's another confusing word. This is where people also get tripped up is that you could have a mortgage in some states, but other states it's not called a mortgage, it's called a deed of trust.
And that's really simple Google to know what your state is if you don't know.
Right, you should do it. But this is not just creative finance, but real estate in general is very confusing because didn't we just say the deed is who the owner is? But then we also said that the deed of trust is a debt. These have nothing to do with each other, but they used a similar word deed in both of them, so it can trip you up. It's very complicated. So what happened is a long time ago, people started using the word mortgage and deed of trust synonymously because it was more simple to just say mortgage. But the reality is in Arizona, we're not a mortgage state, we're a deed of trust state.
And people are technically using that wrong when they say my mortgage. They're actually referring to the loan, not the mortgage.
Right.
There's no mortgage in Arizona.
It's a deed
There's
of
a
trust.
loan, right? But so what you're saying is, guys, commonly you're using the word mortgage incorrectly because the mortgage is a very specific instrument in the loan process.
Right.
And it's important to know that because if you don't understand the differences between these instruments, then how could you possibly do creative financing if you don't understand these?
And so this is a good breakthrough for people is that I'll ask people today on stage, both you and I are speaking at a big event with like 1,500 people today. And I'll ask people, I go, have you ever bought groceries at a grocery store with a credit card? And people go, yeah, of course, we do that all the time. I go, great, so you're going through the cashier tells you what you owe, you pull out your credit card, is that your money? And people are like, no, that's actually somebody else's money. That's American Express's money, right? It's not my money. American Express just approved me to use their money. That's what a credit card is. American Express approved me to use their money. They didn't give me money. They gave me the approval to use their money and pay them back at a later date. That's a credit card. So essentially, I'm pulling out my credit card, I pay for that bag of groceries, and now the cashier's job is to transfer the ownership to me. How do they do that? Well, they take the receipt and they hand it to me and they go, you are now the lawful owner of the property, the groceries. And so the receipt of those groceries is the deed. Okay, so in real estate, the receipt is the deed. I can give, this is what's crazy, I can give the groceries to Jerry and the receipt, and guess who the new owner of those groceries and receipt are? Jerry. Even though the money is still owed to American Express.
Yeah, Jerry doesn't owe American Express, you still owe American Express.
There you go. And so you have to realize that the debt I owe American Express is not the ownership. American Express doesn't own my groceries. I own my groceries because I have the receipt. But there's an agreement between American Express and me, the owner. And in real estate, that is called a promissory note. It is literally a note, one document usually, one piece of paper is a note that I promise to pay American Express back. Therefore, we call it a promissory note. And that promissory note is the agreement between the two parties.
And that includes things like interest rates, due dates, penalty, when it gets paid off, all of the things pertaining to that agreement, right? But where the mortgage or deed of trust now comes into factor is that now there's a security. Right? So if you think about American Express, what's interesting is there is no security.
Right.
Because if let's say that you don't pay that money back from the groceries, right? They're not going to come repossess those groceries because they did not collateralize the groceries to the payment. It's an unsecured loan now you have with American Express. Now you'll wreck your credit and cause all kinds of other problems in your life if you don't pay it back.
But in real estate, that's the powerful thing about Chase, Bank of America, Zions Bank, whoever, is they give you the money, right? They approved you to go buy a house with their money. What they're doing is they're putting that agreement that mortgage against the property in the form of a lien in first position. They're the first position holder, means you're the owner, you have the receipt or the deed in your name, but the mortgage company who let you buy this house with their money, they go, if you fail to make this payment, we have the right to take the property back and sell it to get our capital back.
So the mortgage or deed of trust is collateralizing or securitizing the promissory note. It's basically saying, in the event that I default on this note, I'm giving Chase or Wells Fargo or Bank of America, whoever the lien holder is, I'm agreeing that they can repossess the asset that they collateralized the loan with, right? So it's important to understand that there's two documents, the promissory note, but the mortgage or deed of trust, depending on your state, is what securitizes that loan. And that's what makes real estate such an amazing asset, because you can securitize the actual property to the loan. It's what makes real estate the greatest investment of all time, because you can't do that with a lot of other, you don't securitize stocks. Right?
You know what's interesting is, this is a weird analogy, but when I hear the word lien, here's what I think of in my brain. I used to be a painter, and I know you've done a lot of construction as well. And I would watch my paint crews. They would put a big tall ladder up against the property, and they would lean the ladder up against the property. And when my painter would want to come and spray that portion of the house, he'd have to remove the ladder or the lien against the property in order to paint. And so a lien, right? So I look at this ladder leaning against the property. It's like, I can't do anything with this house until the ladder is pulled off. So think about a ladder up against the property as a lien. So when somebody says, well, I need a personal loan, Jerry, will you give me 50 grand? Jerry goes, yeah, if you let me put a lien against the property, so you can't do anything with it until you pay me my 50 grand back. That's how I learned lien. I learned all this stuff through thinking through analogies, like a lender prevents me from doing things on that side of the house. And these mortgage and deeds of trust, they prevent me, the owner, the guy who holds the receipt. I can't do anything with this property. I can't refinance it, and I can't sell it without paying off that debt, is what I believed. I believed that for a very long time, and I realized that as long as somebody is willing to take over that debt in the exact situation it's in, I could transfer the ownership over. And when I had that epiphany, I was like, game changer. You're joking me. And like the third deal I ever did, okay, this is really ironic, okay? There was a guy who got a divorce, and he's going through a hard time, and he owned this property and had no equity. He's an agent, by the way, too. And he says, I go, I'll buy your house subject to. And he goes, I can't sell it to you subject to, because I have, not only do I owe Wells Fargo my loan, I go, I can take that over, no problem. He goes, well, I have a problem. I have a painting company that charged me 15 grand and I never paid them. They have a lien against my property, a mechanics lien. And ironically, I was like, I already knew the painting ladder scenario. I was like, oh, I can take over that lien. I'm okay with a ladder leaning up against that property. And so I took over not only his first position loan, but I took over a mechanics lien in second position. And I didn't have to make payments on that paint thing for like 6 years. And then when I finally sold the property, I called the painting company and go, I know you're at 15 grand plus penalties and blah, blah, blah. I'll pay you $2,500.
And they're something better than nothing.
They took it. So when you understand these little things like first position, second position, third position, it's like playing Monopoly with like your own.
So Pace, going back to this deed that gets recorded, meaning it's now noticed to the public, it's at the county level. Everywhere we go, it's at the county level. That now puts that ownership of that property. And if you're the lender, you're the bank, or in this case, a mechanics lien, you also record that lien on the property. So now when they do what's called a title search, they're going to look at what's publicly on notice about that property. So you're going to see liens and the position. So positions is important because in the event that Pace gets hit by a bus and they sell the assets, who gets paid back? Well, it's based on priority. So the first lien position, it's not split evenly by everybody. First lien position gets all their money first. If there's any money left over, a second lien position would get all their money. If there's a third, and so whatever's left is based on lien priority.
So think about it this way. Let's say I go buy a truck, right? And I go to Jerry and I go, hey, Jerry, I want to buy this F-150, right? And Jerry goes, yeah, what do you need? I go, I need 20 grand. The cost of it is 20 grand. And Jerry goes, well, it's only worth 20 grand, but sure, I'll give you 20,000 bucks. So Jerry gives me 20. I now owe Jerry $20,000, right? There's an agreement between the two of us called the promissory note, okay? So Jerry then says, we put an agreement together that says if I go to sell that truck or I refinance it or I crash it in the future, the insurance payout doesn't come to me, it goes to Jerry before I get anything, okay? So let's say 3 months later, I decide I want new wheels and new tires and I want a new audio system. So I go to my other buddy, Jamil, and I go, Jamil, you loan me 10 grand.
Soup up this truck.
Let's soup up this truck that's only worth 20 grand. Who's in first position?
Jerry.
Jerry. Who's in second position?
Jamil,
because it's always in order of recorded date. Okay, so Jerry recorded his deed, or not his deed, but his deed of trust or his mortgage or the debt first. Jamil came in second. So let's say I go off and I get in a wreck in this truck. My insurance company goes, okay, we see the truck is worth 20 grand. Who's getting paid?
Jerry.
Jerry's getting paid 20 grand because he's in first position. Guess what? Jamil is SOL. So typically you don't want to be in second position unless there's something in it for you or you understand the risk.
It's higher risk, yeah. And let's say because of those upgrades, you were able to sell it for 25.
There you go. Jamil would have gotten 5.
You would have gotten 5, Jerry 20. So Jerry gets paid first. First lien position.